The man wakes up in the unfamiliar place without understanding where he is, as here has got and where its phone. He tries to reach somebody, but because of door advise him to become silent and calm down. The invisible interlocutor tells the guy that he was pumped up substances, therefore next few days to it, it will be very bad. But now it is time for it to work, and he says goodbye. Joe tries to comprehend everything that has happened to him when hear how the small crack on door at which several bags of food fall opens. The guy runs to it, and the pregnant wife who needs its help asks the invisible security guard to help him at the man of the house. Therefore, it needs to leave from here as soon as possible. To it several times ordered to depart from door and not to put out hand in crack, but the man does not listen, for as is paid, receiving heavy blow. On brush he cries, repeating that he has not deserved it and should not be here. Later Joe ties up brush the tie and surveys the strange place. It lifts products and small bottle with water, but hardly the man is going to try doubtfully treats as the siren begins to sound. And then voice of corporation, the milord welcomes it at advanced training courses where it will become obligatory, the best version of. Joe asks to give it information, but the neighbor advises the guy to shut up. All the same, his questions will be left without answers. The countdown till midnight, so Joe needs to enjoy the last hours of rest, begins. The man does not understand. What does it mean and tries to learn name of the interlocutor. But that is surprised, unless they have that names. And in the next minute, because of walls, shouts of people who order to Joe to become silent and allow them to have a rest begin to reach. The invisible interlocutor advises the guy to accept that this place and is Mollard, and now he has to try to have a sleep, because tomorrow there will be the longest day in his life. Joe takes seat at wall when he suddenly hears melodious Nazvistivanie, after which, because of its shout of the man belittling, reaches not to do. This and its promise tomorrow to be ahead of schedule, but probably it is beaten and somewhere dragged away. Joe closes ears not to hear voice of the poor fellow, and again begun to sound voice, and which assures Joe that all events are directed to restoration of his peace of mind. At last, over the shelter the sun ascends, the same whistle sounds, and the male voice congratulates Joe on the come wonderful day, and reminds that cameras have to be kept clean, otherwise it is weighted by punishment. At this time again, the neighbor who advises gives vote to obey the order, and calls night incident the motivational speech to which he will get used soon. Joe collects not numerous garbage and throws into the fetid hole in floor covered with door, and here he sees underfoot something strange, and having pulled for threads, to find out that it is hair under which the human skull is guessed. Joe in horror shouts, but the neighbor knows that here many people, so Joe, it is necessary to get used to it, have died. The neighbor reminds of the contract which the guy has signed on employment. The Lord palms off all this on everyone, but very few people read up small print up to the end, so all has the price, and the quicker he will join rhythm, the days will be easier for it. It needs to do the work. This moment joins voice, and Joe kills it, shouting that has worked on corporation of 10 years and demands to let out him immediately. On what the milord declares that today, the skills development seminar begins. Its efficiency has fallen lately, and now it had had opportunity to correct it. Once Joe was exemplary employee, but has gradually ceased to appreciate, is young also everything that it has given him, so now it has new work, which will be continued 6 o'clock until 22 o'clock. All this time it has to push mill, 1 point for whole revolution, its day norm will make 50 turns less, will be punished, but the motto of the milord says, does not mean well enough, and he has to try to keep the place, salary, the corporate apartment and life. Billion advise it progress. Joe tries to persuade and to let out him, but the neighbor advises not to waste forces. At the moment he needs to survive, and for this purpose he has to work, and Joe undertakes collar. First to it is very heavy, but the man strains very much, and that begins to move. The Lord congratulates him on the first turn, suggesting to lift virtual toast. For the first victory of Joe pushes collar, listening to advertising, the corporation at last sounds signal of completion of work the Lord had, congratulates him on the termination of 1 day of work on self-improvement. It has exceeded norm, and it is very good. At the night, Joe hears women's shouts while exchanges the Lord reports about the next dismissal. Later, the neighbor, having learned that Joe has exceeded norm twice, advises him not to take such rates. Johnny can understand sense has not executed norm punishment, has executed, but there was the last among all death. On what counsel advises it not to tell about the norm? They are not friends, and the neighbor will always try to be ahead of him. All of them have one general. All of them climbed on career ladder, receiving set of bonuses from the company and apparently have appeared at top. But alas, Joe suddenly begins to tell about the wife and future son for whom they so long waited, and he has appeared here on what the neighbor advises to work, as it is possible better, and it is the only way to survive here. But also it is impossible to overdo, too. The new working day begins. Joe pushes collar and remembers how they with the wife examined the new house, and he promised to work even more to pay its working day comes to an end when knock at Joe's door and to order to take off all clothes. He is frightened, but will obey. Having undressed, it leaves at door, and it appears under water jet. Having hastily washed, he comes back to the camera. The next day comes. Weather on the street is much hotter, and Joe quickly is tired. He asks the neighbor what the mill is and that all of them do here, and that answers that they make nothing, so the blank space in it is not present any purpose and sense. Soon at Joe, water reaches a limit, and he tries to make himself heard to the security guard, but that advises to collect the urine and to get drunk, having filtered it through sneakers. John Cutt refuses to do it, and the invisible interlocutor laughs at it. The milord knows how many what it is necessary for him, and here he shows everything what it is capable of. We, the Lord, wants to know how far he will come, will not break yet. Joe continues work, remembering as the wife doubts its ability to pay all bills, and he promises that their child will have the better life. This evening the Lord notes growth of its self-knowledge, and he suddenly sees cut out by them Alex. Later he is interested at the neighbor who such Alex, and that calls it legend, which managed to leave in the morning of the next day from here. Mollard thanks him for diligence and gives the personalized handle and therefore shows new norm in day the 370th 0 Joe, in horror, and to state all this in the most rough way, and then to explain that people are not always capable to realize the forces. It is heavy, but the world so changes. The signal sounds and Joe undertakes collar and suddenly notices that the circle is not noted on board, but there was cross, which means punishment. One cross is equated to 2 circles, well further from geometrical progression, and then the person gives up. But Joe does not intend to do it with the last bit of strength. He pushes the handle, but villages abandon him. And when the neighbor learns quantity of the circle set to it, it falls into rage. Joe has gained impracticable quantity of circles, has quarreled Meller, and now will suffer. All of them here, Mollard declares that it has not executed norm, and that has brought colleagues, and care of colleagues the main principle of the company. So at it, the new colleague, Cat Stevens Joe, will be horrified, sees the face of the wife on the screen. To promise to exceed any plan, if only it has not appeared here, Mollard gives it 1 day, and turns on the huge shining screen over its compartment, without allowing the man to have a rest. The new working day comes, and Joe undertakes the collar under wish of the Lord to make day productive. And suddenly he sees before himself. 2 Joe laugh at his hopes. He all life worked, hoping that its efforts will pay off. He has messed up and has to give up, but Joe stubborn pushes collar, and exactly in the 10th 00 gains 370 steam. The milord congratulates him on it and cancels penalty, and as motivation show to the man shots of his wife with the baby on hands. Joe cries with happiness, but immediately and with grief, he has passed the son's birth. In the morning, he asks the neighbor to tell all that he knows about this place, and that remembers the son whom saw only in the childhood, because dad spent all rest of the time at work, and is advised by Joe start surveying blind zone to wall. And after long contemplation there is grated place. Having remembered the presented handle, he uses it to chisel through wall, and in night expands deepening a little. But new day comes and Joe undertakes collar, and at night hollows wall again. It proceeds for many days and nights, and eventually it manages to punch opening in which he will be able to get through. Joe gets through in him, but it appears in complete darkness where suddenly there is person who beats him the head. Also wishes sweet dreams. Joe recovers in the camera, the opening is closed up, and again the voice sounds and the milord is disappointed with it, but nevertheless is ready to give it the last chance. It is so fixated on the desires that does not see overall picture, and therefore his neighbors have punished, and its quota has increased to 1,000 turns a day. Joe rushes to wall and learns that to the neighbor have broken leg, and it now and 1 point will not gather, and after the man admits what controls them. The computer which was created by him won the algorithm written to them, has improved itself, and has created the second algorithm, and that 3, and so on. And now people do not know how it works. And here Joe dawns that if they do not work for all will be on 0 points. And what then will make algorithm? Joe shouts the rest and tells about the opening. People respond, supporting its sentences about refusal of work, but all undertake to begin the working day and for the gate because are afraid to die. Joe tries to overpersuade neighbors, but having understood hopelessness of crying undertakes the handle. In the evening they speak with the neighbor and that to tell the name Alex. It went out of the camera too, but it was returned just as Joe, so it is impossible to leave from here. At the night, Joe hears how the Lord swept drag away Alex. In its morning will be both and for maintenance of spirit shows to the man shots with his wife, and already going little son Joe, he cannot be horrified here so long. The man shouts insults to the milord, and to him declare dismissal. Right there, doors open and the crowd of clerks who become on the parties enters and silently looks at the man while he rushes about. Among them, trying to achieve the answer. But here the man in the uniform who admits that he loves dismissals of 12 clerks inside enters. Witnesses of each of them, the man charges the syringe and complains about ingratitude of Joe, to whom few Lord has presented the whole world. The man hopes that soon on one of streets to be freed, the house in which there lives single mother with the little son, and here Johnny maintains and starts beating him. The Lord reports about failed tasks of the security guard and that now will fire him from Joe. On the contrary, the man will stops, having felt blood on hands, but mutilated the security guard asks to continue, and then Joe gets up and shouts that he is not monster and leaves. And immediately Joe appears in office where several employees sit, and his interlocutor congratulates him on passing of the simulator of career development. Everything was within hour, and his son was not born yet. He struggled with middle managers, but has got stuck at the 8th level. We the Lord has understood that he is too good. Its efficiency has grown, personal qualities have increased, and are organized them revolution above any praises at the leader conceiving unconventionally of Joe. Tear off yourself, suckers, but his interlocutor does not pay to it attention, and calls to look at its new office in the Lord heap of positions. And it is possible to rise for years up. Soon couple reaches the necessary floor, but Joe constantly remembers time spent in simulation here about office with new gadgets. Also, Joe waits for salary increase and other pleasant things. On table, the contract under which disclosure endured in simulation will lead to immediate dismissal is prepared. Joe signs it and receives assurances that the milord, his company forever. The man sits down at table, looks at photo of the wife, and Kate calls. She is surprised, and the man hardly holds back tears. They, remembering the long, interesting day, much having recovered the breath, promises to burn this damned place. The movie is submitted as fantastic, but behind each word or the hero's act, the reality-bearing essence of modern corporate system obviously looks through. Banal exploitation of the person because of which people begin to live to work, but do not work to live with you. There was more. Fox will meet very soon.